This week we are going to look at these two major things. It's enculturation and acculturation. So we're going to look at those two, what those two mean, and why they are important and why they matter in education. So let's look at this first one. The first one is enculturation. So what is that? So this is the enculturation. Well, it occurs through different ways of observation and social interaction, and it really starts at birth. And it's your cultural rules, values, expectations, those things that are taught by the family, their peers, school, workplace, and society. So these expectations, they're acquired through conscious and unconscious repetition, and that allows one to conform to their society's norms. So for example, a child would observe their parents like maybe thanking the cashier after shopping in a grocery store every time. And as a result, they'll learn that this is like the cultural norm in their society. Or they may see, younger people opening the doors for older people as they go in and out of a building. That's something that's learned, and that's something that they will repeat as they get older as well. And so enculturation, it can take place openly in formal settings. So learning how to behave in a school setting, that's a formal setting that their teachers are going to teach them throughout their K through 12 experience. Or it can be observed unconsciously in informal settings, like with your family. So there are 4 types of enculturation. You've got formal, right? Informal, conscious, and subconscious. These types of enculturation can also overlap or be combined depending on the context in which the process takes place. So let's look at the first one. Through formal enculturation, individuals are openly taught about norms and values of a culture in formal settings. So an example would be learning about the holidays celebrated in the United States and learning why we celebrate those holidays. So a big one would be why do we get days off, or why do we get to miss school for President's Day? Who are the presidents that we're celebrating? Why is that such a big deal in American society? So in contrast with formal, you have your informal, and that happens in settings which are not really supposed to directly teach anything. It's not like we're going to school and learning about those. And this would be learning it by watching your parents do something. So in public or even at home spaces. So in public, it could be, thanking the cashier. That would be at a marketplace or a grocery store. Or, going to the movies and how to navigate through getting your ticket through the movie, talking to the people if you want snacks at the movie, and then how are you supposed to sit in movies, those kinds of things. So let's talk about the conscious enculturation. So conscious enculturation, it refers to teaching of cultural norms and values that take place deliberately and consciously, right? So it often overlaps with formal, which happens with the goal of passing the culture down. So an example of conscious would be church speeches by ministers passing the Protestant cultural values, right? In contrast, your unconscious enculturation, that happens when an individual learns their culture through channels that are not aiming to teach to them. So again, your subconscious would be done through immersion into the culture. In American culture, technically, if you're on a sidewalk, you're supposed to always walk just like you're driving down the street. You're supposed to walk on, your right-hand side so that you don't run into people. It's really hard when you get into very crowded cities. You'll notice people are all over the sidewalks, but it's just like our driving. And, those are cultural norms that we get used to seeing out in society. We don't really have to learn about those. It's just something that we observe. So here's some more examples. So dress codes. And I'm not talking about dress codes at school. I'm talking about dress codes within society. Those are learned through both legal and sociocultural ways. So for example, if we are in Iran, it is legally expected for women to wear hijab in Iran. You come to the US and you're not going to see women wearing hijab. No matter our religious backgrounds, that's just not something that is expected here. In Iran, it doesn't matter your religious background, but it is important to realize that Islam is the practice and the most recognized religion, and so that is why all women are required to wear a hijab. Another example would be like food and diet. You learn about acceptable diets in your own culture. So for an example, people of the Jewish culture or of the Muslim culture, they are not going to eat pork or drinking alcohol. It's not really acceptable. And they learn that by what their parents cook. They might learn that, if they are practicing in those religions, then they would learn that by going to synagogue or, going, like watching that in the religious aspect. But also it's just learned from like, you don't cook pork, you don't drink a lot of alcohol in certain settings. So that is something that's observed. Also, like history, learning about one's history is also part of enculturation, and it takes place through various ways, including like formal education, curriculum, national celebrations, and symbols. Then there's also acceptable behaviors for parenting styles, right? So we call it like gentle parenting in the US now, where you don't see a lot of like corporal punishment. You don't see a lot of parents hitting their children. And there's nothing wrong if that's how you choose to discipline your child. We just don't see that happening as often or spoken about as often. We have like this more like gentle approach to parenting. So how you discipline your children, or the varying degrees of intervention in adult children's lives, including like in my family, even though I am an adult, because I am not married, my parents do not expect for me to live with a man because I'm not married to him. So like those situations. Also, marriage ceremonies, this is another great example. Like individuals learn about expected marriage ceremonies and rituals in their cultures through like going and watching it, but then also just like learning about it in informal ways. So education, observation. So different styles, like in other traditions, really like the American norm is women always wear their engagement and their wedding rings on the left hand. In other cultures and other religious beliefs, they wear their rings on the right hand. Also, when you're getting married, it depends, women will stand in America, women will stand on the left side and men will stand on the right side. In some other cultures, it's reversed. And finally, interactions with strangers, kind of just like politeness. What is polite in like US culture and other places? Example, in North America, it's considered polite to smile at strangers. In casual interactions, you can be walking down the street, you make eye contact with someone, you have no idea who they are, you just smile. That's just normal. Or, talking to people in customer service, asking how their day is and what's going on. That's normal here. In other places, even like in Eastern Europe, those can seem as like fake or strange. And that's not something you would normally do. Even like giving a thumbs up. Here in the US, that's like a good thing. It signifies approval. But in places like Afghanistan, Iran, parts of Africa, it's rude and it's an insult, almost meaning the same as like the middle finger to us. So it just kind of depends, where you are, these cultural norms that you grow up with and that you learn. So let's look at acculturation. What is that exactly? So that is the process that happens when individuals or groups come into contact with a culture different from their own and begin to adopt certain elements of that new culture. And it doesn't necessarily mean replacing your original culture completely. Instead, people may blend or adapt parts of the new culture, such as language, food, clothing, or social norms, while still maintaining aspects of the original culture. So one example of this would be like a student who speaks Spanish at home. They learn English at school and they start using English slang with their friends, but they still speak Spanish at home. And that's called like code switching. So speak formal English in class, but switches to their home language or slang with friends and family. So there are 4 types of acculturation strategies, and I have them listed here for you. We've got assimilation, adopting the new culture while rejecting the old. You've got separation, maintaining the old culture and rejecting the new. Integration, that's where you maintain the old culture while also adopting the new, and it kind of results in this biculturalism. And then marginalization, rejecting of both old and new cultures. So let's look at some examples of this happening. So language, learning the language of the country, but maintaining your first or your native tongue. So this acculturation really does apply to immigrants. So you can think of immigrants coming to the U.S. with these examples, but like learning English because it's the dominant spoken language in most educational settings, but you still maintain your native tongue and you use that at home. Food blending, we do this all the time in American culture. I mean, we have like Taco Tuesday, we have sushi. So you'll see us blending of foods. We even have like fusion now where you will have like Mexican and Asian food like blended together. But you'll see that blending of cuisines or like just adapting to how things are used here. Holidays, taking part in holiday celebrations. So you learn about President's Day, you learn about the 4th of July, you observe those. You don't necessarily have to go like all in on those American holidays, but then you also recognize them, celebrate them, but you also still partake in your own cultural festivals. So like think of like Day of the Dead, right? That's a very big one, especially here in Arizona with Hispanic culture, Mexican culture, we celebrate Day of the Dead. Keeping our own traditional festivals and holidays while still recognizing the home country holidays. And then clothing, adopting the fashion trends of the new culture. So you may wear jeans, out in public, but then on like special religious holidays or celebrations, you may dress in your traditional native clothing to celebrate and honor that festival or that holiday. So what does enculturation in education look like? So that basically think about learning the culture you're born into. That's enculturation. So the positive, it brings cultural values, traditions, and communication styles to the classroom, and it really helps us to enrich our discussions and our exposure to other cultures. And educators, teachers, administrators, schools that honor these cultures really help strengthen that student's identity at home. So one of the negative or a challenge that we have with this is if the culture is ignored, then when that student comes in or even when they go home, maybe they feel disconnected or marginalized, and that's not something that we want. An example would be like a Native American student who learns traditional stories at home may feel more engaged when teachers incorporate some Indigenous literature and those traditional stories into the classroom. Acculturation education. So this is, think of it as adapting to new or dominant culture while maintaining aspects of your own. The positive would be it helps immigrants or bilingual students navigate school experiences while maintaining their own culture. And also, like just outside of that one student, it builds these cross-cultural understandings in classrooms. The negative or some of the challenges, it may lead to students feeling pressured to fit in, resulting in some stress or in the loss of their cultural identity. And teachers may need to adapt their instruction. So this would be a challenge, not necessarily a negative, but a challenge for teachers is to get language support that students need. So if you have a student that comes from Japan and they only know Japanese, you may need some language support and have an interpreter come in and help you bridge that between the Japanese and English. An example, an immigrant student learns English at school while still speaking their first language at home, and that way they're able to balance both cultures. And I know we have students in this class in particular who speak like Vietnamese. There's also like Spanish being spoken and other languages that are represented. You are interacting with me in English as your educator, as your professor, but then at home with your family interactions, you're speaking in your native language. So why does it matter? It matters because when schools support both enculturation and acculturation, students develop stronger academic achievement, self-esteem, and also cultural identity. And when schools ignore these processes, it can lead to like gaps in achievement, cultural conflict, and then the student just becoming completely disengaged and not understanding really the value and the value of the education that they're trying to attain